Welcome to the Nightly News with RBNN. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight we will be discussing the ethics surrounding the food industry. This includes dairies and how the actions of the food industry affect the people eating it. The waste and the pollution that come with food production factories will be discussed as well. We will be discussing the good and bad of dairies and how it relates to certain aspects of ethics in this industry. Another aspect that will be discussed is organizations that try to advocate for these animals and help these industries better themselves. All of these topics relate to different areas of ethics. There is no shortage of issues to discuss when it comes to this subject. To get us started off, I will go over some of the good and the bad of dairies and what kind of ethics come into play. To start off, I will dive into some global ethics involving dairies. Now, let me remind you, global ethics is the ethics that involve different parts of the world and how their ethics differ from one another. There seems to be a divide in how dairies are run in the United States versus other countries just in general, let's say Europe. In other countries, it seems to be the case that small-scale farming is better as opposed to big-scale farming, which is what the United States usually does. The difference with these dairies is that most of them are slaughter-free and allow animals to live out their natural lives. They're not in huge dairies, big cattle. It's more individual, small scale, not as many cows, let's say. Now, global ethics can play a large role in how these animals are treated as well. It can all stem back to cultural values and beliefs. Let's say you go to India, cows are sacred there. But here, cows are just a means to an end, a meal on the table. In the past, it was believed that animals had no rights and there should be no one to protect them. Now, the status of that has changed somewhat in a lot of people's eyes. It can be easily seen as ethically wrong to treat animals poorly, not just house animals, but animals in these dairies and things such as that. Now, to dive into another area, let's talk about some of the pollution that can occur as a result of these big scale dairies. On this side of things, I will be using environmental justice as my example of ethics. This is when everyone has a right to what is public and free on the earth, such as air, water, grassy areas, things such as that. By using the smaller scale system, other countries, let's say Scotland, use, there is potential to actually help the environment. One example of this is that animals can create their natural fertilizer instead of a chemically compounded fertilizer. And this helps the earth by leaving less chemicals in the ground. Also, by farming this way, the industry lessens greenhouse gases by using factories and things such as that. This makes the air cleaner for everyone who justly deserves to have clean air. And there's also less runoff into waterways, making the water cleaner and not as polluted just overall. So what would have to change in order for us to help our environment by changing these dairies in this food industry? Well, the standards of living may have to change for the environment to not be harmed as it is now. An option could be back to going back and living in the old ways. You will grow your own crops, have your own animals, butcher them, things such as that. Now, that idea would probably be frowned upon by most because it is a lot of hard labor and lots of times people would grow to see these animals come as their pets. So it may not be the best choice. That is why I have presented this idea of small farming, such as other countries do, because this is a way to reduce the pollution, and animal mistreatment while still getting the same supplies as before. Now, of course, we have to look at the economic side of things. I will be focusing on the efficiency side of the ethics compass for this point. The truth is that it may not be efficient to do this in the United States as of our country right now. It could cause people to lose jobs, and prices for the products such as the milk and meat and cheese could potentially skyrocket in stores. Now, this may not be sustainable for our economy at this moment because these products are so highly used. The true decision that has to be made by this industry is what is more important to them, their prices, keeping jobs, or helping the environment and helping the animals. Lastly, I want to dive into how these animals are being treated. As stated before, animals are now seen as deserving the same right that humans have on some terms, of course, within reason. I would correlate this with virtue ethics, which involves morals and personal standards. The things that they're happening to a lot of these animals is not seen as morally right in the eyes of a lot of people. Some examples of what's happening in these dairies are cows are getting impregnated in short intervals. The calves are being separated from their mother directly after birth. There is an overproduction of milk from these cows. This can cause things such as infections. Also, a lot of these dairies and cows are living in poor living conditions, not humane or animal humane for them. We would say it was awful if any human was being treated this way. So let's move into some organizations. With organizations such as PETA, animals are being seen as creatures that should have rights. PETA is an organization that advocates for animals. They believe in justice for animals. This can go into more the idea of distributive justice for ethics, which is how justice is given out equally or not. And how not all creatures are seen as equal at this time. This idea is evident in how differently animals are treated, even in just different countries, going back to global ethics. As I said before, there are big differences in dairies, and it would be safe to say that there are similarities in things such as chicken farms and other food production systems. Lauren will dive more into the issue of animal cruelty and do an analysis on that. I hope that this segment has informed you on the ethical issues of the food industry, namely dairies. That will be all for this segment. Now on to Lauren for more information on animal cruelty in the food industry.
Thanks, Kira, for starting us off. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Buckley, and I'll be diving more into animal cruelty within the food industry. As Kira stated before, there is a huge mistreatment in the dairy industry with cows. Calves who are males are taken away from their mom after birth and taken to a slaughterhouse after 14 to 16 weeks, while female cows are taken from their dairy mom when they turn 1 year old and they start getting inseminated and start to become dairy cows for 3 to 5 years. After they are done with their time, their bodies can barely stand and die days later. But that is just dairy. Let's dive into cows in general, pigs, and chickens. Within the food industry, there is so many things going wrong with how they treat animals. Every year, there are more than 58 billion cows, pigs, and chickens that are being caged, crowded, deprived, drugged, mutilated, and manhandled all over the world's factories, farms, and slaughterhouses. Just in the United States, there are about 10 billion animals alone dealing with this horrific pain. These production companies are so successful that they disregard the profits and hide the truth from the consumers on how animals are actually being treated. But if we have to say one positive thing about these productions is that they do not let any part of the animal's body get to waste. Cows are getting pumped daily until they are unable to give out more milk. Once they are no good, they are sent to slaughterhouses. Chickens are stacked in cages and are fed until they look like they are going to explode, aka until they are crippled and cannot walk, which then leads them to slaughterhouses. Pigs are stuck in cages that are so packed that none of them can move around. Pigs are kept pregnant, and once they have their piglets, they are torn from their mothers so their mom can get pregnant again. Now, let's look at the ethical issues behind the animal abuse within the food industry. There are a lot of controversial opinions on if animals are treated ethical or unethical. But with having the Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act, it confirms that most animal cruelty is a federal crime. Animal cruelty is a type of abuse which shows that people cannot take care of an animal. No matter what, cows, chickens, or pigs are a pet to a farm. It is unethical to torture helpless animals just to be eaten. Raising them in a beautiful open land and giving them nutrients they need can easily do the job and have good outcomes of big chickens and delicious milk. Also, with the industry, they are lying to the people by having logos such as cage free or grass fed only, which they're actually, while they're actually demolishing these animals' lives, but yet lying to the people and communities just to keep the money is not right. So please look at your food before you buy it, because you would not want to be encouraging these horrible slaughterhouses. I mean, also don't bite it either. Thank you for listening, and now I will pass it on to Miles, who will be discussing food waste in the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Animal cruelty poses a huge ethical issue regarding the food industry. On another note, it turns out disposing of plastic objects is not the only threat to the environment. Food waste is another contributing factor to global pollution. It is a major global issue regarding the food industry. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, 1/3 of the world's food is lost or wasted every year, which is estimated to be about 2.2 trillion pounds of food. And what happens to all this food waste? It ends up in landfills, which generate methane, a major greenhouse gas, which Colton will speak more about. This incomprehensible amount of food waste is a major global issue, especially when society comes into play. The FAO indicates that 811 million people are starving. In the United States alone, 1 in 8 Americans struggle to provide food for themselves and their families. This brings up a few questions. If there's an extreme amount of food waste, why are millions of people hungry? Why hasn't there been a viable solution to this problem? It seems that we need a modern day Antaeus to bring both environmental and social justice. With this problem, there is also a solution, a sort of food for thought. Companies should look to shift their focus towards natural capitalism. It is a tremendous business opportunity that does not only reduce food waste and hunger in society, but it is also very profitable. It involves 4 shifts in business practices: increasing the productivity of natural resources, shift to biologically inspired production models, move towards solution-based business model, and reinvesting in natural capital. Companies can revolutionize agriculture, correct the mistreatment of animals, the entire food industry. The possibilities are endless. With that being said, food is a basic human necessity. If companies shift their focus towards natural capitalism, they'll put money in their pockets and food on the table. Now with Colton on methane pollution.
Thank you for that perspective, Miles. Just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, research shows that mass production of food, particularly meat, leads to even more problems for our environment. For most of human history, meat was considered a luxury product. As the standard of living has increased over the past century, so has our demand for meat, and consumption around the world has nearly doubled from the 1960s to today, from an average of 50 pounds annually per person to 95 pounds. Americans consume far more, however, averaging 133 pounds of red meat and poultry per year per person, according to the USDA. Nearly all meat, poultry, and dairy products consumed in the United States come from industrial scale operations. Thousands of pigs, cows, and chickens are kept in closely confined conditions indoors or on dirt lots. Industrial agriculture is the leading contributor of pollutants to lakes, rivers, and reservoirs in the United States, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. The issue we will address is less visible, but more destructive, and a key contributing factor to rising global temperatures. US industrial livestock farms produce up to 1.37 billion tons of manure each year. This is 20 times more fecal waste than the entire US human population, and is kept in small areas where these animals live. Waste such as this emits methane gas, and industrial livestock farms account for 32% of global methane gas emissions. Why is this a problem? Well, methane gas on its own is 30 times stronger than CO2 and contributes from 10 to 25% of global warming. Although it remains in the atmosphere for less time than CO2, from anywhere from 10 to 100 years, it eventually turns into more CO2, further adding to the problem. Manure contributes to 14% of all agricultural greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. Now let's move on to analyzing the ethics surrounding this issue, firstly by addressing the externalities that are caused by it. The main positive externality is the increased standard of living that these companies provide, especially here in the United States. As a population, we now have seemingly unlimited access to affordable meat that we do not have to harvest ourselves. This commodity comes at a price, however. The methods of production result in the many negative externalities of various forms of pollution. In the interest of time, we will focus specifically on methane gas emissions. As we know, methane gas directly contributes to rising global temperatures, a phenomenon that will inevitably affect all life on this planet. As we look for ways to prevent this catastrophe, we must search for sustainable food production as well to ensure that all life on Earth has a future. Does this mean eliminating industrial food production, changing it, or continuing it as is? What would be the just course of action? What is ethical? Let's analyze this. To begin, we will look at this through the lens of our ethical frameworks with utilitarianism. Again, the goal here is to maximize good and minimize harm for the greatest number. Human life has been made better through industrial food production. This is true, but this is not the case everywhere on Earth, as not all nations have the capability to mass produce their food as we do here in the United States. The resulting damage to the environment, however, is something that everyone on Earth will be affected by. Industrial farming has made life better here, maybe, but it is also helping to push the entire world towards global warming. So even for a utilitarian, the current industrial system is not ethical, as it does not maximize good. As a matter of fact, it has a maximizing negative effect if you look at it globally. Now let's analyze if it is just. To determine this, we can analyze it under the 4 pillars of justice: liberty, equality, efficiency, and community. True liberty is absolute freedom. And in a libertarian world, there should be no interference towards one's pursuit of happiness. And they should have the freedom to operate in any way they see fit, regardless of negative externalities. But that doesn't determine justice alone. In terms of equality, not everyone has the same access to the food that is actually produced, and only a small portion of the global population enjoys the benefit. The only equality provided is the exposure to climate change that we will all inevitably experience if nothing is done, if these methane emissions aren't put under control. Industrial farming may seem efficient, but as Miles pointed out, it also produces staggering amounts of waste. Industrial farming does, however, have a positive impact on the community in terms of food availability, but then it counteracts it through pollution and animal cruelty. Therefore, we can even draw the conclusion that industrial farming does not bring about justice. A fundamental shift in our society is needed to address these problems. If we want a better future for our planet, we should learn to become a part of it again. We must see the value in eating with the seasons and consuming locally sourced and sustainable food. Industrial farming can be done better, and we should demand of our leaders to enact legislation that requires them to do so. Reducing waste and reducing emissions is vital to the survival of life on this planet. Thank you.